Want your brand to be seen and be remembered? Effective campaigns need both. JCDecaux's high-quality billboard sites in premium locations nationwide offer brands powerful and visible stages for emotive, impactful and influential storytelling. Find out how JCDecaux can help your brand be seen and be remembered at www.beseenberemembered.co.nz. Nau mai, hoki mai, ki other fold, imahine, ko Duncan Greive tōku ingoa. My guest today is Paul Thompson. Been wanting this one for a while. He's the Chief Executive and the Editor-in-Chief of RNZ. He started in the role way back in September 2013, which makes him comfortably New Zealand's longest-serving media exec. Back when he started, the environment was unrecognisable from what it is today. There's no Netflix, there's no TikTok, there's no spin-off. I mean, how did we even live? Spotify had been in the local market for barely a year. The average New Zealander watched 3 hours of linear TV a day, and RNZ was then called Radio New Zealand and was basically a radio brand. Had a website, allowed for audio streaming and a smattering of news, but it was all about that on-air, live, linear audio product. Paul came from Fairfax Media, where he'd been exec editor for the previous 5 years, so he'd driven Stuff's growth through that first kind of big decade of the internet. And that's what RNZ's board was looking for with him. Its then chair, Richard Griffin, described him as having been donkey deep, wild phrase, donkey deep in technology for a number of years. So during his time at RNZ, Thompson has overseen a significant growth of the organisation's digital news operation and audience, and recently a broadening into lifestyle content. And that has given a more than 50% uplift in the audience size, and that has not coincidentally been associated with a 50% increase in its budget at the end of the last Labour government. So it has had these wins. It's had wins in podcasting. It's massively increased its sort of social footprint, but the radio product has not had the same sense of momentum, and in fact has gone backwards. It's drifted from a peak of over 700,000 in the early pandemic, this is weekly listeners, to less than 500,000 today. And there were heightened audiences then, and there was a real kind of podium of truth, go get the news from places that you can trust kind of mentality all across the media. And there is a sort of a thesis that there is decline in radio listening. The data doesn't tend to back that up, though, and certainly the opposition hasn't had quite the same struggles. In fact, Newstalk ZB, the closest like-for-like station, has had a real boon in audience lately, and that situation, that kind of continued decline across live radio listening, prompted Paul Thompson to commission a report from Richard Sutherland, the former head of news at RNZ. That report landed with a bit of a bombshell a couple of weeks ago, and very was just a great piece of writing as much as anything else. You can quibble with what it said, but he went and spoke to over 50 staff and kind of put together, it's really only 10 pages, the material part of it, but it is very blunt, very direct. It identifies problems with audience clarity, problems with on-air talent, staff sort of distracted, staff not really sure what they are there to do. It suggested everything from compulsory return to office, relocating the whole of morning report to Auckland. It basically said that they need to treat this like an emergency and have all hands to the pump to fix it. So it seemed a great time to have Paul on the podcast to sort of speak to that report and where RNZ is at more broadly. So here he is. Tēnā koe, Paul. Welcome back to the fold.
Kia ora. Good to be here.
Let's start with the reason for the season, the Sutherland report. What prompted you to commission it?
Well, we've been working hard on our radio numbers and our radio engagement, and when I saw the May GfK numbers had tracked down again, my realisation was that more of the same wasn't going to cut it, that we did need a new plan. And as chief executive, I thought a crucial part of that was to get some advice and that it should be robust. So commissioned Richard to give me that advice, and he came into the business and talked with people and had a really careful listen, and then wrote his advice and provided that to me. And I think it's a really good catalyst for having a rethink about what we're doing. The numbers have been tracking down. More of the same won't cut it, and we do need a new plan. So his advice has been useful in terms of stimulating some different thinking and different approaches.
I mean, sometimes these reports can feel like they're commissioned to say you've commissioned something, but not because you actually want the cold, hard truth. Very much not the case with Richard's work. One of the most direct pieces of communication I've read in a while. As was your commissioning of it, was admirably succinct. How did you feel when you sort of sat down and opened it?
I felt that he'd fulfilled his brief, and that it was useful, and that we did need to change our thinking, and you can't do that by just getting a report or some advice that just tells you what you already know or what you want to hear. So I think it was a really useful exercise to go through, and our people were curious because we'd been open about Richard doing the work. It was pretty clear to me that we needed to share it for it to be effective. Make sure that we were being transparent. That's such a big part of what we do as an organisation. Probably the key point, though, is it is a series of recommendations and advice from him. What we're doing as an organisation is informed by that, but we have a lot of other data sources that are going into what we have built as our audio plan. But I think it would be very hard to bring the kind of attention to the issue without that self-reflection that's triggered.
Shane Curry at the Herald had some response from the union, and they sort of characterised staff as being quite upset by aspects of it. Do you have any sort of regrets, or are there parts of the report that you think were too strong potentially?
No, because it's Richard's view, and I think just keeping that in mind is really important. I've spent the last 2 or 3 weeks talking to, I think, probably everyone at RNZ, including lots of one-on-ones and lots of big kaimahi meetings. And look, there's a range of feedback. Some people say this is absolutely what we needed to do. Fantastic, let's get on and do it. Some people, it's given them pause for thought, and it's not always easy. So my key messages have been, it's Richard's advice, what we do together is our plan. But running right through that is that we're going to make sure that everyone can contribute. Our overall strategy is really working, Duncan. I don't know whether you've seen the column that I wrote on rnz.co.nz today, but our multimedia strategy's really delivered our charter to many more New Zealanders and communities than Radio New Zealand or RNZ has ever done. So giving people that context and saying within that, we do need to do better with RNZ National. That audience, some of that audience are not connecting with us, and we are going to have to focus to do a better job for them, and I'm up for that, and I think the team's up for that, but trying to get people not to lose sight that the overall strategy has delivered.
When you think about, I do want to get into the digital and the sort of overall strategic elements later on, but sticking with radio for the time being, there's always a tension in organisations between kind of preserving what is valuable and beloved about an output and an approach versus needing to move things on. And that's also reflected in terms of your people, your kaimahi, in terms of who will execute on that. Do you feel like RNZ, from a live radio perspective, has that balance right of the reverence for the institution and the pushing forward?
I think it's a great question. We're a public media organisation, so our key job is to deliver our charter to as many New Zealanders as possible. And our charter also talks about using the most efficient means of distribution, so that's literally what it says in our legislation. but also as a public media organisation, people do rely on us to do a great job for the part of RNZ that they connect with. So we've worked really hard on the digital and social growth. Radical Sharing's got our content into every nook and cranny, which we think's been really effective. But that doesn't mean we're let off the hook in terms of our radio audience. And the numbers are clear that we have been tracking down in what is a very competitive market. And we're not going to abandon our overall strategy, because I think it is very powerful for delivering to New Zealanders when more than ever they need our trusted content and entertainment. But yep, now it's time now to focus in on that radio and that audio audience and give them some more love, and that's what we're focusing on doing.
So you had some encouraging results, at least, a very slight uptick in the overall numbers in the most recent GfK, which I think came out earlier this week potentially. But they also really do reveal the locus of the problem, which is in Auckland. On Saturday mornings, for example, your audience in Wellington is almost the same size as the one in Auckland. If you were to sort of extrapolate the Wellington and Christchurch numbers on a population basis, and if you hit the same proportion of the audience in Auckland, you don't have a problem at all. And that is something, that sense of Auckland being not quite the focus of the organisation and of the on-air product was something that Sutherland identified. Do you want to speak to that? Why is it that Aucklanders don't like RNZ?
Well, we have lots of audience members in Auckland, obviously, but I think it is a good question, and it's one of the things I've been talking to staff about. We're New Zealand's public media organisation, and we can't thrive unless we thrive in Auckland. And over the last few years, we have moved more shows, more staff, and more focus to Auckland, and we do need to grow our Auckland presence even more, because unless we thrive in this market, we really can't deliver to the nation. But it's not just about the radio audience. That ambition is not just about the radio audience. Yes, part of what we're doing is making sure that RNZ National does resonate with people in Auckland, and that's very important. But if you just take an example like our RNZ Asia team and our RNZ Chinese and Indo NZ, those are really good initiatives in Auckland for the communities of Auckland that are broader than the station. But the key point is we do need to do better here. We have put effort into that. There will be more effort. And probably worth noting that we are going to be moving into improved premises in the first half of next year. And we're jam-packed in Auckland. We've grown the team large here. We can't actually squeeze anyone in at the moment. So that does give us an opportunity to grow.
Yeah, part of what, the sort of, or a corollary to the Auckland problem is a perceived sort of Wellington centricity. I listened to a story this morning, which played out on First Up, that was an Auckland story, but it was about people sort of driving on cycleways and parking on berms. It almost felt like a Wellington version of an Auckland story. Interesting, but it didn't have the same, it didn't feel like it was the kind of centre of what is eating this city. Do you think that the sort of the Wellington's view of the country thing, like that is you talk to people, that's a very common critique of the station as a whole. Do you believe there's validity to that?
Look, I think you have to look at the respective performance of RNZ National in Auckland and Wellington and Christchurch and see that this is the challenging market, and it's a very competitive market, as you know. We used to be an organisation that had 90% of our people, including all our executive team, all of our news managers in Wellington. That's no longer the case. I think that story you flagged, I did hear that on First Up. It was an interesting local story, but there were stories and perspectives and discussion across Morning Report this morning that reflected all of the concerns of New Zealand, including the issues that are important to Aucklanders, property prices, and the political debate around those would be a good example. So I think there is definitely an opportunity for us to get better at that, but we also can't flip it on its head and just become about Auckland. This is more about having a national presence as the public media organisation for the whole nation, but you need to be strong in Auckland to do that, and we do need to get stronger. So growing our Auckland presence is absolutely part of the plan.
One final question on radio. So the station that does win, that's in the talk news format, Newstalk ZB, that they sort of have a particular approach and a politics and a whole bunch of things, but you might have thought that was a sort of a sunsetting station in some ways a few years ago, yet it seems like, certainly from an audience perspective, it's in very rude health now. Do you listen to ZB and if you do, what do you hear when that sort of makes sense of their appeal to particularly this city?
I listen to a lot of radio, and not just RNZ, so lots of stations, and certainly keep an eye on the market. Look, they're a really effective radio station that absolutely understands their market, and good on them. We're very different. As I said before, our key job is delivering the charter. We're never going to run the organisation focused on getting one of our services or one of our platforms or one of our radio stations to a certain number as an end in itself. So for me, the focus is more on delivering our charter and being different and playing our unique role in the market. Now, audience engagement and relevance is one measure of how you're going, and obviously we've got some work to do there. But we do need to keep faith with the fact that we're a public media organisation. Our job is around reliable, comprehensive news, making sure we're representing all of Aotearoa's cultures and perspectives and delivering to that kind of sense of national identity and cohesion. So that's the tension that we always have, and it's a tension that's a good thing. So it means that we will have a different strategy and a different approach. I mean, the good thing is the market has both of us, and it has a whole bunch of other radio stations. That's what we want, right? We want a plurality of media, and each should be doing their own job. And we're very clear that our job is delivering the charter. Our top job is delivering the charter.
The JC Deco Billboard Network delivers quality reach via commanding sites to ensure your campaign is visible and impactful. With superior screen quality and premium locations, JC Deco can help your campaign be seen and be remembered. Visit www.beseenberemembered.co.nz to learn more. So let's switch to another method of delivering the charter, which is in digital formats. And probably the brightest spot for RNZ at the moment is the digital news audience on platform. What do you put that down to? That growth that you've experienced was quite striking in the last year or two.
We're doing a good job, and we're responding to audience needs, and it's been a really great team effort. It's the range and breadth of our content, and you talked about it being a news offering. Yep, there's lots of news there, and our news offering is really strong and comprehensive and compelling, I think. But, we do know that news fatigue is an issue for audiences, so part of the success of rnz.co.nz is the breadth of content that includes the life content which we've built up to cover arts and culture and more lifestyle issues. It includes our podcasts and our video. I mentioned RNZ Asia, so I think it is the range of content that's now there in a really accessible form, which gives New Zealanders lots of choice, and the experience is good. They like doing it. So we've done a really great job there, and I do think the team should feel proud of that.
How do you sort of balance those sort of, like it's a classic tension of public media in terms of how much do you sort of give the audience what they want versus what they need? There was, for example, last year during the Diddy trial, that was something that RNZ covered, even though it was a case from a different city a long way away. And some people I spoke to in the industry felt like that was classic commercial media fare and didn't have a lot of relevance to a New Zealand audience, especially in a public media standpoint. How do you kind of get that balance right? And do you think that you've got it right at the moment?
I do think we get the balance right. And New Zealanders are interested in a whole bunch of things. Some of those are local topics, some of those are international topics. And I think it's, a bit arbitrary to focus in on the treatment of any one story when we're doing dozens and dozens of stories and items and interviews every day, which we showcase. So that's the responsibility of the team and the editors, and thinking about things which will deliver on our charter, which is all about keeping people informed and enlightened and entertained. All of those things are in our charter. So we shouldn't back away from providing that mix of content. But if you do look at our website and our digital, a lot of the stories are absolutely focused on that core delivery of trusted news and information, trusted conversations, giving people perspectives, and also information that's useful for them, that's actually practical to their lives. So, for example, Susan Edmonds reporting on consumer issues from a financial point of view, that stuff really resonates. So for me, it comes down to getting the mix right. Any one story is open for criticism, but overall providing that high-quality experience is what we do.
In terms of the demography of the digital audience and the geography of it versus what you know of the radio audience, how different are they? And, do you believe that those audiences that you're not hitting with the radio audience, you are making up for that with this sort of newly acquired digital audience?
They complement each other well. There is overlap, obviously. People who love RNZ, and they'll come to us on every platform. And then there's some people, particularly younger age groups, who definitely are more likely to come to us on social channels or digital. But it's, none of our audiences skew incredibly young. I mean, I think as media companies, we all are challenged around connecting with young audiences who have quite different preferences. So you can look at our online audience as being younger than our radio audience by and large, but the real breadth of our delivery to that 80% of New Zealanders that we now reach is also through the fact you can read a story on Stuff from RNZ. You can go onto our YouTube channel, which has got a highly engaged audience, and watch a video, listen to a podcast, or watch a show. So the power of our multimedia approach is we get to that 80% of people through all those means. And we don't really mind where people connect with us. It's going to be at times on a radio station. Sometimes it'll be through a podcast, a social media item, and our really strong website or on a partner site. For us, it's how we bring that together, and that's how we get that wider distribution of audience and wider connection that we'd never be able to get on RNZ National alone.
Thinking about those younger audiences that you identified, they're known to be hard to reach for everyone, but in some ways the hard to reach and certainly hard to commercialize, off platform, whether it's on Spotify or YouTube or TikTok, that seems like a sort of a classic public media opportunity. Do you feel like RNZ at the moment is trying hard enough and meeting that audience where they are to the extent that you could or should to fulfill that charter?
We've grown engagement on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and Facebook really successfully in the last couple of years, and the engagement is not just about delivering to the reach, it's the levels of engagement are strong. So I think we're on a really good path there. And you're right, Duncan, we have the great freedom because we're publicly funded to get our content to where people are spending their time. So that will continue to be a big part of our focus. Good to see that we're growing, and I suspect there is more growth there. And if we can give people an amazing experience with RNZ content on YouTube, and that's where they want and expect us to be, we're going to be in their boots and all. So that will continue to be a focus.
Thinking about even younger audiences, like sort of the children's content side, which what is sort of, I was speaking to a friend yesterday who sort of cites that as an area that RNZ doesn't seem to have as much of a plan for. Is that just a sort of a wait for them to age into your target range, or is that something which you're probably missing on? What do you think?
Look, for us, it's about the content. We don't have the desire or even the resources to invest in a big platform that might bring them in, and that's difficult for any media organisation to do. So for us, it's about the mix of content, and we do commission content for tamariki and rangatahi, and then getting it into their lives and getting it into their world is the strategy. But if you look at our funding and everything we need to do, from RNZ Concert, RNZ National, RNZ Pacific, our website, our newsroom, our regional reach, what we do in urban areas, there's always some priorities that need to be set, and there's a limited amount of resource that we can put into younger audiences. We do invest in really good content, but it's more about it being focused, and if we were to put a lot more into that, there would be a trade-off with some of the things where the audience engagement is really strong with older audiences. So that's the tension we're wrestling with. But we do need to be realistic about our ability to be successful there. And that's not a criticism of RNZ. Every media company faces this challenge of engaging with those younger cohorts.
I've got some sympathy for you on that front, because there was, a couple of years ago, you tried to make quite a profound change around RNZ Concert and moving that to a frequency, and were effectively sort of heckler's veto by some of the most ardent fans of that station. Tahi sort of came out of a response to that, but given that both the known demography and of the radio product, and the level of resourcing that running a concert as a live FM station requires, do you feel like the ratio of the amount of content which serves older New Zealanders versus the amount of content which directly serves the sort of the tahi audience, do you think, like, from a funding and resource perspective, that you've got that right?
Look, it feels right to me, and it reflects the reality that audiences who are foundational to us, who've been with us for a long time, really expect us to keep doing the things we've done for them. And that's really important, that we keep the faith. Those people do rely on us. And at the same time, we obviously need to stretch into other audiences, but do that as most efficiently and effectively as we can, given that our resources are our resources. So to me, the mix feels right. Continue to assess it. But we look to focus on making sure we've got a range of content, making it readily available, and broadly across it, there's something there for everyone. But the reality is that the focus is on the people who are likely to come to our website, likely to come to our radio stations. They will tend to be on the older side. And therefore, the social connection and all the other strategies and just getting the right content to them is important. But that tension's always there, Duncan, and I think the mix is right. Will we continue to adapt? Of course, audiences are always changing, and we'll always adapt to them.
In terms of the role of video for RNZ, historically, obviously, an audio first organisation that has now adapted into a lot of well-distributed text-based news. But there is a huge move towards video for audience, particularly on distributed sort of social and streaming platforms. What do you see as the role of video in the future of RNZ, and how do you sort of continue to serve what is an increasingly complex multimedia environment from an audience perspective?
Video is important, and it's, as you say, particularly on social channels, it's essential. And we do quite a lot of video. You can see it on our website and our social channels every day. And we also commission video content. So you go onto our video section, and you'll be able to see everything from short form documentaries through to feature films, which is great. The breadth is there. I thought the Context podcast, which we launched last week, which Guy Nesper and Corin Dan host, it's a podcast, it's an audio experience, but you can also watch it if that's what you want to do. So being smart around the things we're seeing here up in your setup about being able to do audio and video together. But we do need to always be mindful of the audio strengths and capability of RNZ and playing to those as best we can. But video will always be part of the mix as well. Audiences do expect it. But again, it comes back to what we've been talking about through your last few questions. You can't do everything, and you need to be prioritising. And I'm proud and pleased with the range of video content we're providing. I think it will continue to grow, but it won't be a rapid change or a massive shift, but it's got to be there because audiences expect it of us.
One of the recommendations that Richard Sutherland made was a statement higher. And in some ways, you've made a number of those on the journalism side. Some particularly stuff's really senior name brand journalists have come across and continue to do exceptional work. You mentioned Susan Edmonds, Eloise Gibson, Kirsty Johnston. I'm missing a number as well. Do you think that the audio space is sort of ripe for that, or do you have to can you proactively do that when you 24 hours in a day, and the shows, are the shows for the most part? You've had some small changes there. What did you make of that recommendation? And there was also a critique of the sort of talent pipeline perspective as well. Is that sort of on air, public facing talent piece where you'd like it to be?
We have an amazing lineup of presenters who are working really hard, and we've got big names. Of course, we do. They're well-known people working for audiences every day. So Richard's advice was advice, but any public broadcaster, any media companies is always going to look for opportunities to bring people in where those openings occur. So, and we've done that just as part of our business. I don't see that changing. And we'll always be open to those opportunities where they come in. But I have to look at our lineup. It is really strong. And the initial focus is making sure we give them every bit of support to really do a fantastic job as we re-energise the station.
When you look at the likes of Kim Hill and Guy Nesper, they would be statement of hires were any other organisation to have them. They're not in kind of regular, always on-air slots now. Do you think that in terms of deploying the talent that you have, that also felt like a thread that Sutherland pulled on, was the sense that people aren't necessarily sort of compelled to maybe step into those slots that really drive the on-air audience, that they work instead on either self-directed projects or in some cases on projects that are outside of RNZ entirely. What did you make of that thread?
It's more just the point you're making. Isn't it great? We've got Guy and Kim within our family, and in a world from the past, it would all be about them having a presence on air on RNZ National, but we are a multimedia organisation at the moment doing different things, but you can hear them, both those people and the range of presenters we have across our networks, across our podcasts, and all of the stuff that we do. So if we've got a multimedia strategy, and therefore our people will be appearing on different formats and different storytelling, it's just part of what we need to do as a multimedia company. But it's great also that those voices and people are also on RNZ National where it works.
Thinking about your people, you recently, like a number of private sector organisations, went through a period of redundancies, or allowing for voluntary redundancies. How did that, and experienced a cut in funding too, how did that sort of flow through the organisation? How's everyone sort of feeling there to your mind?
I mean, the background is we had a 7% funding cut in our budget, which means we need to be really thinking about the efficiency of the organisation and making sure we're financially sustainable, but we're no different to any media company. So we had a voluntary redundancy round, which was successful, which is an effective way of removing some cost and making sure that we are prudent. But no media company can kind of sit and say they don't need to do further things to make sure they're as efficient as they can be. So we're like everyone else. We'll just continue to look to make sensible changes to remain financially viable and do the work we need to do to prioritise the strategy. So it's not easy. It's never easy, but we are privileged to have public funding, and the goal is to make sure we deliver as much value to the public as we can from that.
We're now a couple of years on from the sort of pro-Russia edits scandal. That was a complex story, and I think David Fisher did some very good reporting on that. So, some of it which came out, some months later. Could you sort of reflect on that period, on your own involvement and on the organisational response to it?
It was a very difficult time, and whilst the number of stories that were affected was quite small, it still was a cause for us to bring in an independent panel to do a review. They made 22 recommendations, which we've implemented, and it's really good to see our trust levels tracking up, and which is fantastic. So a lot of work's gone in behind that. Look, those times are really, really difficult. I think we responded and actually used it as an opportunity to improve as an organisation, particularly around our commitment around impartial, reliable, accurate news, appointing Jane Patterson, our former political editor, as the champion of editorial standards and the policy and our editorial policy, doing a lot more training of our people and really living and breathing the standards that we have to deliver. So a very difficult time. I think our response was appropriate and honest and open, and it has made us better as an organisation, which is not easy to go through that, but we did take it as an opportunity to lift our game, and we needed to. And as always, did it as transparently as we could. And simple things like improving our complaints process, making it easier for people to give us feedback, doing independent critiques of sensitive areas of content at least once a year, and then being open about it. This has made us stronger as an organisation.
In terms of the organisation's politics, it's a public media institution. It's taxpayer funded. I assume that you'd agree that it shouldn't have a politics or any kind of partisan nature, and yet there is a perception of the sort of red radio and there's a kind of a regular critique of RNZ that in an era where there are much more forums for that to kind of come to be surfaced, that has come out. And you do sometimes hear, for example, where there's listener feedback, it tends to be, if not one-way traffic, certainly more one way than the other, as a kind of tell, even if there is a fairly scrupulous quality to I think most of the interviews, and a lot of the attacks, certainly to my ears, feel ill-founded. How do you sort of wrestle with that sense of, you've got an audience that at times wants you to be a certain way, and you've got a charter that resists that, and you've got inbound complaints or a kind of a constant hum of them outside, and you also don't want to be boring. How do those kind of competing forces mesh within RNZ for you?
Look, under our charter, our job is to be objective and impartial and have very high standards. So that's the work that we do every day. And thanks for acknowledging, the fact that we do have high standards and deliver to them. I agree with that. People will always have an opinion around media and criticisms of media, and maybe some of those criticisms have become more polarised, not just for us and not just in New Zealand. I think that's part of where people are highly critical of the media. So for us, it's about making sure that it's less about saying, trust us, we know what we're doing. It's more about showing that we are trustworthy. And that goes back to training people really well, having a good, transparent complaint system. When we make mistakes, not looking to sweep it under the carpet, but actually correcting it openly, having the courage to have independent editorial reviews so that we can come in with some robustness. We're about to release another one of those soon. So for me, it's more about living and breathing the charter, and we talk about this every day. And our editorial policy is not this thing which sits in the drawer and we occasionally refer to it. It's a live, living guide for our staff, and we do a lot of training around it. So it's the day-to-day attention to doing that job, which is to provide an impartial service to New Zealanders.
So a lot of what you've spoken about, it comes under an umbrella of transparency and of having review and internal standards, but also external review. That seems to be something that has risen as you've been in the role. How do your sort of staff, senior staff and kind of more junior staff respond to that sort of elevation of critique, when something like the Sutherland report lands, or when Jane has things to say about standards? How have people responded to that?
Look, the spirit and the commitment of the amazing people I work with at RNZ is an absolute superpower for the organisation. And, we have people doing all these different things across all the different content and platforms and services that we're delivering. It's a massive team effort. Part of the reality of working in a public media organisation, it's the same whether you're the ABC or the BBC or RNZ, is a high level of public scrutiny. We need to be accountable and transparent. So it does go with the territory. My key thought here and belief is that we have to be upfront and transparent, but we also have to support our people to kind of achieve the high standards that are set for us by the community. So it can be challenging and you'll get a mix of responses, but we actually do back our people and give them the support. And I think openness and giving people training and development opportunity is a really good approach. So you've been in the role for, I think it's 12 years next month, longest serving CE of a major media organisation. I think I have this right, that there are quite a few board spots which are up for renewal next year, including Jim and the chair spot. How's your job satisfaction going? How many more sort of years do you feel like you personally have left in you as this kind of period of renewal rolls through the governance space? In terms of my job satisfaction, I love my job, always have. It's the job I always wanted to do. And whilst responding and adapting to audience demands and strengthening areas where we need to do better is difficult, I also feel energised by that challenge. And board changes are a reality of any company, and certainly any public media company, and I've been through lots of those. So I'm really focused on doing the best job that I can, and I've got a few things that I need to lead, and I'm really pleased and feel privileged to be able to do that.
Well, I will let you get on with that aspect of your job. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming up here on The Fold and for your time and engagement.
Thank you, Duncan. All the best. Cheers.
Seeing is not enough. With optimized data tools and insights, the JC2Co Billboard network helps brands be remembered. Dedicated to closing the loop between impression and action, JC2Co can help your campaign be seen and be remembered. Visit www.beseenberemembered.co.nz to learn more.